Welcome back to the ranch, folks. This morning we're going to change the fork seals on my CX500 motorcycle. It's been leaking for a little while. The left fork's been leaking a lot more than the right fork, but we're going to change both the seals. The fork itself, the bottom part of the fork, I stripped clean and painted. They were just aluminum. Cleaned them all up, painted them black, and you'll see it in the other part of the footage when I remove it from the motorcycle. So we'll get on with that and show you what it's like changing the seals on a CX500, 1981 Honda CX500. If you're interested, stick around. Okay, to get into the project here, folks, one thing you're going to have to make yourself before you start putting the whole thing back together is a method of pushing the seals, the bushing, and the seals back down into the bottom of the gear fork leg. What I took was a piece of 1 1/4 inch ABS black pipe. Super simple. Nice square end on one end. This end here I actually cut off on a cut-off saw, so it's nice and square and flat. This end I just cut it off as I cut it in half with a bandsaw. You can use jigsaw. Well, jigsaw wouldn't work well, but bandsaw, or you could even put it in a vise and cut it with a handsaw vertically if you wanted to. Clean up all the edges, get all the schwarf off of there from the plastic, and make yourself this seal setter, which is just longer than the amount of strut that's going to stick out of your fork, so that you can pound on the end of it and not pound on the end of your fork. So if you get that made up, then you're ready to go, and then it's just sitting there. So let's get on with putting this back together. Now the manual is typically a manual. The one I have is a Haynes manual, and it's okay. It shows you the parts, but if you take it all apart and lay it around on the bench here, then you're going to go scratching your head figuring out which sequence to put it back together. So I'll just show you the sequence so that it's a little easier than looking it up in the manual. So on the bottom of our fork, so in the internals that go inside of the stanchion, as they call it, they call this chrome part the stanchion. This is called the damper rod, and then the lower part of the fork leg. So we just take out our, this is the screw that holds the leg in the bottom of the strut, which we took out earlier. So the way that the sequence that happens here is we take our damper rod with the spring on it, and it goes inside of the stanchion leg all the way down to the bottom, and you see it comes out the bottom of the stanchion leg. Feel the spring in there. Then on the bottom of that goes the cap, and it sits in the bottom of the stanchion leg. That stanchion then goes into the lower section of the fork, sits at the bottom, and then we take our locking screw, which goes into the end, and if you do it very carefully, you can get it to start. There we go. It started and it is getting snug. I just take a open end wrench, fairly small one, put it on the end of my Allen key, and give it a quick little tweak. There we go. And that snugged up our locking screw in the bottom of our fork leg, holding the stanchion in. Now we can take our bushing. On this bushing, it's beveled on the end so that it slides into its position so that the bushing, that the stanchion will ride on the bushing in this point of the leg. So we put it on, and then there we go. You should be able to see that. Maybe I can just do this a little bit. There we go. Now we use our seal driver that we made. Get our square end at the bottom. Put the two halves on the tube. I use just a band clamp. I've preset it so that it's just snug. There we go. Rubber mallet. Not quite, needs a little more. There we go. And that has our bushing nicely seated where it's supposed to be in the bottom of the, or say again, in the bottom portion of the fork. Okay, so the bushing is back in. Now we need to put our washer back on, and it's got a bit of a rib on it, and it sits in here this way with the rib sticking up. Then we take our new seal, original Honda parts, put a little bit of the fluid that they want. The fluid that they want us to service it with is automatic transmission fluid. So that's what we use. I've got some ATF here. Lube it up well. Ensure that there's no rough edges on the top of your stanchion. The seal goes in. On the edge of this seal, I don't know if you can tell, there's a bit of a raised rib here. That goes down into the bottom of the fork. So the spring part of the seal, you can see this spring here, is up. Carefully put it over top of your stanchion and slide it down. Now you can push it just into the top of the fork by hand. I don't think you can see it any better up there if I do it there. Nope. Set that there. A little better camera angle on this here. There we go. That might be a little better. Push it in there just by hand. And then once again we use our seal driver. Put it around the stanchion. Put the clamp on. As you can see, I've just set the clamp and it just holds it snug, but doesn't have to squeeze it too tight. And then we drive it in. And the seal is nicely set the depth it needs to go, so we put our washer and our locking clip to hold it in. So the new seal is in. We get our locking clip. Just have to clean it up a little bit. Make sure it's good and clean. Little Scotch-Brite works good for this. It's just got a little buildup of grime and stuff on it. I should have cleaned this up before we got going here, but that's part of the process. Clean it up and get it ready to go back in for you. I also need the big washer that sits on top of it. As always, one part missing. Okay, I have to go find the washer that sits underneath that locking clip. Stand by. Okay, back at it. I have my spacer washer there. So here's our fork ready to go. We've got our seal driven in with our seal driver that we made up. So we put our spacer in. Set it there, maybe you can see a little better. Put our spacer in. There we go. And then our snap ring will go on top of that. There we go. About there. Our snap ring to lock our retainer spacer in on top of our seal. Keep our seal in place. Of course, now my snap ring pliers don't want to do their job. There we go. Just slide it down into place with a screwdriver here. There we go. Snapped in. There. Okay, so our seal's in here with our spacer and our snap ring. I don't know if you can quite see it there. Snap ring holding it all in. The stanchion moves nicely. And we're ready to put our dust seal back on. Same thing. Lube it up with a little automatic transmission fluid. Have to put some gloves back on. There we go. Get another pair of gloves, put them back on. Keep the ATF off your hands. It feels like crap on your hands, and it's not good for you anyway. All these lubricants and sealers and things, you should always wear gloves doing this. I just didn't put a pair back on to put that snap ring back in, but I usually wear them all the time doing this kind of stuff. Okay. Bit more ATF on the dust seal. Get it lubed up well so it slides over our stanchion as well as nicely into our seat. There. So, dust seal on, slide it down, and it just presses in by hand down into the top of the fork leg. There we go. Clean the rest up a little bit. And there we have the fork leg complete. Ready to put the springs back in and put the cap on. Okay, now these springs, we put the long spring in the bottom. There we go. We put in our washer that goes between the two springs. Stand it up right here. There we go. Then we put our short spring on top of that spring. back this up for you a little bit. There we go. So the short spring goes in on top of the long spring. Then we take our cap. It's got its O-ring on there to seal the fluid from coming out. Sorry, just about forgot. We have to put in our fluid, our ATF, and our ATF, the manual says 220 centimeters, so I got an equivalent to that and measured it out and have it in my little cup here. So there's 220 centimeters, 0.94 of a cup of automatic transmission fluid, and I'll put that into the top of the strut. You can hear it gurgling away there. Didn't even spill any. It's amazing. So the fluid's back in. Put our short spring on top of the long spring. And now our cap with the seal can compress. This is a bit of a trick. You have to hold it down and give it some turns. Try not to crush the palm of your hand. I think what I need is a heavier glove for this hand. It's a little bit tough on the palm of the hand. Try this out. Success. Okay, so caps in, and the same procedure for taking the strut out of the bike, the fork out of the bike. You break this cap loose while the fork is still clamped into the triple tree, and it'll hold it in place. So what I'm going to do is put it in, tighten up the triple tree clamp, and then snug the last little bit down. And then I can also align it so that my fork is perfectly aligned for my fender to go on, axle to go in, and this cap to be oriented properly. So it turns anyway, so that's not a big deal. But I can put it all, tighten it up, and then put it in the trip ring and clamp this portion so everything aligns. So that'll be the next step. So that's the rebuild on a CX500 1981 fork. Remember, with all this stuff, don't let fear and common sense stop you. Just do it. Pick up the tools, give it a try. This is not that tough. Most of these jobs aren't that tough, but why pay somebody else to do something you can actually do yourself pretty easily? And if it frustrates you for a little bit, so what? You learn something by the time you're done. That's what we want to do here on this channel, is just get people to just do it. Just go ahead and do it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.